everybody. So today's lesson is about velocity components, and to explain this I thought I would use the example of a plane that is taking off from the runway. So this diagram shows an aircraft that is taking off, and let's say the velocity of that aircraft is 100 meters per second. Now, you know what happens is when an aircraft is taking off, it's doing two things. It's going forwards as well as it's going upwards. So this 100 meters per second is almost like its resultant velocity. So we can actually figure out how fast is it going forwards and how fast is it going upwards. And this is what we do. So the blue arrow shows the velocity of the aircraft, which is the resultant velocity, and it's actually made up of two components. It's made up of a vertical component, Vy, which tells you how fast it's going upwards, and it's also made of a horizontal component, Vx, which tells you how fast it's going forwards. Now let's assume that angle is 20 degrees. So if you want to find how fast is it going forwards, you consider this right angle triangle. Now Vx and Vy are components that are at right angles, okay? And so that becomes the hypotenuse. So Vx is the adjacent, and the 100 meters per second is your hypotenuse. So if you look at cos 20, you get Vx over 100, and so Vx is 100 cos 20, so it's going forwards at 97 meters per second. In the same way, how quickly is it going upwards? So you're looking at the vertical component. So that's the opposite for that angle, and that's the hypotenuse. So we get Vy is 100 sine 20, and you get 34 meters per second. So what we are doing, this thing is called resolution of vectors into its components. That's a term that we use. So when we find the components of a vector, we say we are resolving it into its component. So the vector doesn't always have to be a velocity vector. It could be a force vector. It could be any vector that is going at an angle. So you can have, any sorts of vectors. So what we have to keep in mind is that if this is going in that way, so it's going that much upwards and that much forwards. So, and the components are always mutually at right angles to each other. So what it generates is a right angled triangle. And so we can use Pythagoras here to, if you know one of the sides, or you can also use your trig relationships to find quantities. So there are some questions for this lesson, and if you can work those out, and they come under velocity components. So that's all for today's lesson, and I hope you understood that. Bye for now.